Times I've sat on set as a producer and wondered, wow, what would have happened if I'd hired the other director we were considering? Because right now this is a nightmare. Sort of wondering, because in my producing career you hire a lot of directors and you always think in the back of your mind, will it be a different movie? What would happen? Some of it started with Good Will Hunting, where we developed it with Mel Gibson for a while. We developed it with Michael Mann, who ultimately decided that Matt wasn't a good enough actor to be in Good Will Hunting. And so I'd had that experience of working with different directors, and I thought it might be really interesting for the audience to see two directors making the same decisions based on the same script. And so it was an idea that I had been trying to put together for a while and was slowly starting to raise the money.
Got it. Now, how did you get Zachary involved?
Well, I actually met Zach's partner, Neil, and we were talking about the movies they'd been doing, and they kind of reminded me of Matt, Ben, and I when we were younger. I'm old, in case you can't tell right here. And and they've made some amazing movies on very low budgets recently, and I haven't done that. I've been fortunate enough to be primarily making studio movies. And so when The Chair was starting to come together, I called Neil, and then Zach and I met, and their other partner, Corey, and I said, listen, I'm also going to be raising the money and sort of putting it together. We need some people to sort of make sure the movies are made correctly and they work well, and you guys know what you're doing. Would you ever be interested in producing on camera, which is always a rough thing. Yeah. And luckily for me, they were.
We started our production company before there were pictures 6 years ago, and we've made 6 movies in as many years. Margin Call, All Is Lost, both of which were directed by J.C. Chandor, and his upcoming movie, Most Violent Year. And then another sort of crop of lower budget films as well, one called Break Up at the Wedding, one called Banshee Chapter. And Chris approached us about this idea, and it had appealed to us on a lot of levels. I'm from Pittsburgh originally, which is where the series takes place, and both of my business partners and I all went to college there at Carnegie Mellon University. So that was a real initial point of enthusiasm for us, which was bringing jobs back to Pittsburgh, bringing attention to Pittsburgh. And Chris, who's an incredibly forward-thinking producer and businessman, really liked the idea of trying to cultivate a regional film center somewhere, and Pittsburgh's ripe for that in the way that Atlanta has that, and Albuquerque, smaller cities in the country that lend themselves to different kinds of film production. And the way he pitched it to us was really exciting, and we all looked at the opportunity not only for ourselves but also for the city that we love. And that is such a beautiful city, as is evidenced by the great cinematography, not only on the show but in each of the films. So we were really excited about it, and the idea of being on camera, which was probably the point that I was most concerned about, was really easier than I thought, and I guess that's also because I ended up getting a job and having to leave the country for the month. So most of my appearances are on Skype or seeing me on the phone. But even when I came back and we had our screenings and stuff, and there were cameras around, I felt like it was less intrusive. And when you watch the show, I feel like it's a very accurate representation of the process.
So let's set up the show then. We have 2 filmmakers that you guys found. How did you find them in the first place? How did?
Well, I want to say that one of the filmmakers is a woman named Anna Martimucci, who I met through these guys. One of the movies that Zach just mentioned was Break Up at a Wedding, and I think it's hilarious, and I love the movie. And Neil had invited me to a premiere or a sort of early on screening here in LA, and I really liked it and thought it was funny. And so I met Anna and her 2 partners, Victor and Phil, and actually worked with them on a different project before The Chair came up, and really liked working with them. And they got such high reviews from Zach and Neil and Corey that when The Chair came up, Anna and I had been talking about could she direct a movie. And when I turned to Zach and these guys who had worked with her on Break Up in a Wedding, and I said, listen, you've been on set with her, you've seen her as a writer and a producer, do you think she's ready to go direct a movie? Because it's tough. It's hard to go out and do your first movie. And so in Anna's case, it was through their experience, and I met her through these guys. I don't know if you want to say how you guys met them.
Yeah, I mean, Anna and Victor are married, and Neil and Corey and I went to college with Victor, so we have a long history with them, and part of the ethos of Before the Door is really cultivating relationships that we've had for a long time, and giving people opportunities that they might not otherwise have. So we made Break Up at a Wedding, which was written by Anna and Victor and Phil, but directed by Victor, And Anna, as Chris said, is a really talented writer and actress, and we thought it was a really good opportunity for her to discover her own voice and to step into her own potential and her own capacity as a filmmaker. And so we put her forth as a possible candidate for one of the directing slots on the show, and Chris really thought it felt like the right fit, and I think that she's proven that that's the case.
And we have Shane as well, who is a YouTube star
Right.
with 10 million followers, and he is coming into this with, I think you talk about in the first episode, trying to translate from being a YouTube star into being a director. So what are we going to kind of see with him?
Well, Shane's funny because the stuff that he does is a very specific thing, and I think Shane is trying, as you said, and he admits it, in the documentary, that he's trying to transition into being a filmmaker and making longer form product. And I think you'll see that he does that. He has a very specific style that I think he'll be making, Shane Dawson movies, not necessarily for hire, get hired by other people, but he has the ability to manage people. He had the ability to sort of perform. And he made it a very broad comedy, and also is in it. He made himself the lead of the movie.
Yeah.
He
He's
also,
a brand.
he's struggling with the brand versus becoming a filmmaker because they're two separate things to some level. So you'll see him go through that struggle in the show.
Yeah, and but he also really created an environment. I was able to visit Pittsburgh in the middle of the production on Not Cool, on Shane's movie. And it was a really happy set. It was a really functional place. Everybody was glad to be there. Everybody was really giving 100%. And I think that all trickles up to him. I mean, I think he's got a lot of enthusiasm for what he's doing. I think he knows his audience, and I think that's reflected in the production and in the set and the environment that he created on set.